Good morning and happy Valentine's Day. The House will come to order. All those in the galleries and in the House, please rise and join us today in a prayer from Monsignor Kerwicki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let us bow our heads and pray. Great God, our King, on this St. Valentine's Day, who has called us to walk in your way and to live with love in our hearts, grant unto us the blessed assurance that although at times we may forget you, you never forget us. And notwithstanding the fact that sometimes we let you down, you never let us down. May your Spirit abide in us throughout all of our changing moods and sustain us in every effort. Bless the young people of our state. Strengthen them that they may have full belief in the rights of all their peers. Help them to use their freedom to discover in themselves their very best and to find creative channels for their restless energy and to live and love for solid relationships at home, school, and work. And the House says, Amen.
Please remain standing and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the approval of the House Journal for the 22nd day, Monday, February 13th, 2023, and ask for a roll call vote.
The gentleman from Jackson has moved for the approval for the House Journal for the 22nd day, Monday, February the 13th, 2023, and has requested a roll call vote. Are there any additions or subtractions to the Journal? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the Journal will vote yes. Those opposed will vote no. Mr. Clerk, please ring the bell and open the board. Has everybody voted? Mr. Clerk, please close the board and tally the vote. By your vote of 144 yea, 1 nay, and 3 present, you've approved the journal. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be introduction of special guests.
Introduction of special guests. Gentleman from St. Louis County, O'Donnell District.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guest.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to introduce credit union leaders from across Missouri who are visiting the state capitol today, up in the upper chamber to your left and my right, Mr. Speaker. These staff and volunteers are here to advocate on behalf of the members they serve and join us in the chamber today. As you know, credit unions are not-for-profit financial cooperatives owned by the people who use them and provide an important financial services option for consumers in our state. More than 1.7 million Missourians are members of credit unions and benefit from their services, and that number continues to grow in Missouri and around the nation. Please join me in welcoming the Missouri Credit Union Association and the credit union community for their of Missouri to the state capitol today. Please make them feel welcome.
Further introductions. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guest.
Please proceed.
On my left and your right, between the fourth and fifth column, I have some special guests with me today and constituents of the beautiful 96th District. We all know the hard work interns do in this building. Paul Winenberg is an intern in Representative John Patterson's office. He's currently majoring in political science at Truman State, and he is looking at law schools. He has a full ride to our very own Mizzou and SLU. With him are his mother Rose and Paul Winenberg and aunt and uncle Bob and Terry Buer. Please welcome them to the House.
Further introductions. Gentleman from Lincoln. Warren. My bad.
Mr. Speaker, introduction of special guests.
Please proceed.
In the back gallery behind us here is a group of retired teachers from the Daniel Boone region, the Warren County, R3, and the Wright City School District. They were very instrumental in the forming of me, and so any credit or discredit can be shared right up there. Would you please welcome the group that came up today to say hello?
Further introductions. Lady from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guests.
Please proceed.
I am super excited today. We have a group of family physicians here who are doing the hard work at Family Care Health Center, which is an FQHC in St. Louis. We have Dr. Gotta put my glasses on, sorry. Kemdi Egekeze, Kylie Harmon, Elizabeth Garrett, who also happens to be a constituent, Victoria Phillips, Megan Hernandez, and Carrie Rowley. And let's just thank them for all the hard work they do and welcome them to the House.
Further introductions. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Other than my own, Mr. Speaker, for an introduction of special guests.
Please proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the in the middle, 2 columns to my left here and to your right, Mr. Speaker, as 2 groups are represented, Mr. Tom Eisel of the Silver-Haired Legislators and Sarah and Tom Haney and Dennis Ganal of Missouri Tax Relief Now. These organizations advocate for senior citizens in Missouri and have a long and accomplished history of advocating for real estate and property tax-friendly proposals for them. They'll be around the Capitol making their rounds on further advocacy, and I'd like the House to make them feel welcome today.
Gentleman from Scott.
Introduction of special guests, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
On your left and to my right in the upper gallery from Oran, Missouri, part of the corn growers from our district. They made the trip this morning, leaving at 5 o'clock, traveling 250 miles, 4 hours. Please stand are Pat Sire, Robert Gravitt, Dan Hahn, Chris Mattingly, and Caleb Prickle. Would you give them a welcome, please?
Further introductions. Gentleman from Butler.
To introduce special guest, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, on my left and your right, between the 3rd and 4th Carlton, is my wife, Diane Millington, and we've been married 50 years, June 23rd, and Diane and me are the one that wanted to buy flowers for all the women in the house, because we just, today the day that you care about people and that you show love to one another, and I am so grateful for her. Would the House please give her a hand, Lord? I would appreciate it.
Very nice gesture. Happy Valentine's Day. Further introductions. Gentleman from Nottoway.
Introduction of special guests.
Please proceed.
Today, Mr. Speaker, I would like to introduce the General Assembly of Northwest Missouri State University's 100th Student Senate. To my left and your right in the side gallery is the Student Senate Executive Board. We have President Elizabeth Modizzetti, Vice President Dami Popola, and Treasurer Jillian McNamara. Also in the upper gallery are members of the Northwest Student Senate. They are being advised by Dr. Corey Hoffman. Would you please join me in welcoming them to the chamber?
Lady from right, from a microphone other than your own.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of special guest.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To my left and your right, between the 2nd and 3rd columns, are two special guests of mine today, both staff members at the Alliance for Life Missouri. Marcia Middleton, the Chief Executive Officer, and Mary Taylor, the Alternatives to Abortion Program Manager. For over 20 years, the Alliance for Life Missouri has been assisting Missouri's pregnancy resource centers and maternity homes in providing services to pregnant and postpartum women in need. Over 70 agencies and nearly 100 locations are members of the Alliance. The Alliance for Life Missouri also assists the Department of Social Services by helping administer the state's longstanding Alternatives to Abortion Program, which supports women in carrying their pregnancies to term and for at least 1 year after birth. Please join me in welcoming Marcia and Mary to the Missouri House of Representatives.
Further introductions. Gentleman from St. Louis.
To make an announcement.
Please proceed.
Good morning to the House. I'd like to just spend out a special welcome to a gentleman who's unable to join us today, but today is Dr. Terry Freeman's birthday. He's a professor of mechanical engineering at the St. Louis Community College. So he's a strong advocate for engineering and making engineering available to all of us. So if everyone could just wave to the front and wish Dr. Freeman a happy birthday. Thank you.
Further introductions. Gentleman from St. Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Introduction of a special guest.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I would like to introduce you and the body to Zach Diebold. Zach is a junior at Fort Zumwalt South High School and will be spending the day shadowing me around today. Zach serves the Find the Light Foundation and is the IT and Resource Department Director. Find the Light is a student and alumni-led nonprofit that began in St. Charles, is now serving all of Missouri. They are dedicated to fighting the mental health crisis in students and young adults. This includes sponsoring programs like peer advocacy, alumni mentoring, district need assessments, and hosting an easily accessible resource library. This organization started as a simple Facebook status and turned into a new foundation dedicated to helping Missouri students break the cycle and take control of their own mental health. Find the Light is almost entirely operated by students and young adults, and Zach is one of their leading members. I'm thrilled to have him here today, and I look forward to supporting Find the Light Foundation to the endeavors to make our kids healthy and safe. Zach is over here on my left, to your right, sir, and I would ask the body to please make Zach welcome. Thank you very much.
Further introductions. Gentleman from Cooper, please proceed.
Introduction of special guest from a microphone other than my own. He did say proceed, so I will. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today in the halls of the Capitol, you might see 31 individuals roaming around. They are members of the Fire Service Leadership Enhancement Program. This program brings together executives, chiefs, leaders, in the fire service to learn leadership or to provide them with leadership opportunities, which now is going to include the legislature. They've been doing this now for 22 years, and with me today, between the third and fourth column, is Harry Ward, Conferences and Special Projects Director with the University of Missouri, Tracy Gray, Conferences and Special Projects Assistant with the University of Missouri, and Gail Hagens. I'm sorry, Gail, I should have known that. She is a field program manager, and I would tell you the heart and soul of everything that goes on at the Missouri Fire Rescue Training Institute. So if you all will join me, please, and talk to the folks out there who are firefighters, give them a welcome.
Further introductions. Lady from St. Louis.
Introduction of special guest.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On your left and to my right, between the third and fourth pole, is a person that I first worked with in 1996 as just a person who was trying to help my neighborhood when I came up to this Capitol. He was a state representative. And then in 2000, when I came back up to this Capitol to assist the city of St. Louis by getting the Missouri driver's license in Bosnian, he was Senator Pat Darty, and he is my special guest today, and I can't thank him enough for all he helped me with when he was in this building. Give a big round of applause, please.
Welcome to the House. Further introductions to special guests. Seeing none, gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be points of personal privilege, and I ask you to recognize the lady from Jackson, District 26 first, followed by the lady from St. Louis, District 79.
Lady from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Moment of personal privilege, please.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Harold Holliday Sr. was a lawyer and legislator who devoted his career to advancing the cause of civil rights in Missouri. He was a founding member of Freedom Incorporated and an important black political organization in Jackson County, and served for 12 years in the Missouri House of Representatives, where he was known for his fiery oratory and dedication to progressive legislation. Holliday was born in Muskogee, Oklahoma, we've heard that before, in 1918, and moved to Kansas City with his mother Eliza and sister Isola 2 years later. He attended Dunbar Elementary in the Leeds neighborhood and graduated from Lincoln High School in 1935. He earned a bachelor's degree from Lincoln University in Jefferson City, Missouri in 1939, and a master's degree in economics from the University of Michigan in 1941. Drafted in the U.S. Army in 1942, he attained the rank of second lieutenant before his honorable discharge in 1945. Holliday began blazing civil rights trail when he applied for admission at the University of Kansas City, now known as University of Missouri, Kansas City, at their law school. But he was rejected because of his race. Working with the Americans Veterans Committee, he gained admission in 1948 and graduated with honors in 1952, becoming the first African American to receive a law degree from that school. Kansas City was an almost entirely segregated city in the early 1950s. After Holliday passed the bar exam and entered the practice of law in 1952, he immediately put his legal training to work in attempts to improve conditions for African Americans in Kansas City. He joined with parents of students at Booker T. Washington School to protest over the overcrowded conditions there. That protest led to a successful lawsuit by Holliday and attorney Louis Clymer that allowed black students to attend Benton School, later renamed D.A. Holmes School. In 1957, Holliday served as general counsel for the Community Committee for Social Justice in a suit to desegregate eating establishments in downtown Kansas City stores. Holliday was a charter member of Freedom Incorporated when it was founded in 1961, and later he served as chairman of the board of directors. He began his career as a legislator in 1964, running on the Democratic ticket, and with the backing of Freedom Incorporated, he won a seat in the Missouri House of Representatives. Holliday served in this body until 1976, where he became known as a staunch and impassionate advocate for the poor and oppressed citizens of Missouri. He wrote numerous laws, including one to abolish the ban on interracial marriages in Missouri. In his 12 years in the House, Holliday became known as a skilled and knowledgeable legislator and a spellbinding speaker. Holliday was noted for supporting progressive legislation in consumer protection and other areas. He fought against imposing increases on interest rate ceilings on small loans and helped win support for new laws to tighten requirements on door-to-door salesmen and to permit the suspension of payment on defective merchandise. In 1967, Holliday lost a bid to become the first black senator for Kansas City. After leaving the legislature, he served as a magistrate judge in Kansas City and then as associate regional counsel to the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, aka HUD. He retired from that position in 1983. In addition to his work at Freedom Incorporated, Holliday was active in other organizations that benefited African Americans. He spent 25 years as either a member of the executive committee or an officer for the Kansas City chapter of the Missouri National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, including president. He also served for 10 years as an officer or member for the board of directors for the Kansas City Urban League. Holliday passed in his home in Kansas City on March 21st, 1985, following a lingering prostate cancer battle. Funny story, I'm very connected to this family, and actually one of the Montessori schools is actually named after him, Harold Holliday Montessori in Kansas City. Actually, it's named after his son. So his family carried on his long lineage of supporting Kansas City and civil rights in Missouri. So I would like the body to help me remember and give a warm round for Harold Holliday. Thank you.
Lady from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A moment of personal privilege.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to give a brief history of the song Lift Every Voice and Sing. Lift Every Voice and Sing was written during a fraught moment in African American history. At the dawn of the 20th century, post-Civil War Reconstruction efforts were being dismantled. Segregation had been codified through Pesley versus Ferguson, and a Jim Crow reign of terror and exploitation was taking a hold across the country. In this hostile climate, many black communities turned inward, forming their own schools, newspapers, musical groups, religious and social organizations. James Weldon Johnson and John Rosamond Johnson, two brothers from Jacksonville, Florida, were steeped in this situation. James was a poet laureate and the principal of a segregated school, while John Rosamond taught music there. In 1899, James set out to write a poem commemorating the birth date of Abraham Lincoln. He said, "My thoughts began buzzing around a central idea of writing a poem about Lincoln, but couldn't get them." He wrote in his autobiography, Long This Way. Instead, he wrote a poem about black struggle and perseverance and asked his brother to set his words to music. The result, which moved James himself to tears, captured a painful history of oppression, stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, while ending on a note of resilience. May we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. The song was first performed the following year at Johnson School by a group of 500 children. The Johnsons would move out of Jacksonville, Florida, following a deadly fire that ripped through the city. They brought the song to a Harlem's art scene that was quickly becoming a hotbed for creativity. Meanwhile, the song would also independently spread outward from its original city. As the song was passed along communally, it was also boosted by powerful black leaders and organizations, including the National Association of Colored Women's Club and Booker T. Washington. In 1919, the National the NAACP named its original and official song by James Weldon Johnson will be appointed to the organizations as its first African American executive secretary a year later. The civil rights era began in 1950s. Lift Every Voice and Sing was sung during organizational meetings from Montgomery boycott and quoted in speeches by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This song is more than just a song. It is a symbol of resistance and a universal signifier of black identity. I will read the first and third stanza of the Black National Anthem. If everyone could stand. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who has by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray, lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we meet thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, be forgotten, thee, shadowed beneath thy hand. We may forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land. This is not a wokeness. This is about the history of our country and the history of our people and people who live in this chamber and who serve in this chamber. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for this moment of personal privilege.
Thank you, lady. Gentleman from Jackson.
Mr. Speaker, next order of business will be first reading of House bills and resolutions.
Mr. Clerk, would you please read the House bills and House resolutions?
House Bill number 1135, introduced by Taylor, 84, an act relating to unlawful possession of firearms with penalty provisions and an emergency clause. House Bill number 1136, introduced by Meredith, an act relating to exemptions from sales and use tax. And House Bill number 1137, introduced by Meredith, an act relating to incentives for timely remittance of taxes.
Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be House bills for perfection. House Bills 640 and 729 will move to the informal calendar. I now ask you to recognize the gentleman from St. Louis for a motion on House Committee substitute for House Bill 184.
Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I move that House Bill 184 be perfected and printed.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has moved for the perfection and printing of House Bill 184. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Mr. Speaker, I move that House Committee substitute for House Bill 184 be adopted.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has moved for the adoption of House Committee substitute House Bill 184. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the title for House Committee substitute for House Bill 184 be agreed to.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has moved for the adoption of the title for House Committee substitute to House Bill 184. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the title will signify by saying aye, and those opposed no. And the ayes have it. You've agreed to the title. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I bring to you House Bill 184, electric charging stations. This bill provides that any political subdivision that adopts an ordinance, resolution, regulation, code, or policy that requires installation of an electric charging station must pay the cost associated with the installation. The bill also states that schools and churches cannot be required to install EV charging stations, and this bill states that no more than 5 stations can be required. That's the gist of the bill, and with that, I'll take any questions.
Further discussion on House Committee substitute to House Bill 184. Lady from St. Louis. I'm sorry, Jackson.
Close. Platt.
Platt. Northern Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To inquire of the bill sponsor.
Does the gentleman from St. Louis yield?
I certainly do.
Please proceed.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I am having sat through the bill hearing and having heard this bill before, I've got a few questions to clarify things, I think, for folks in this room that will hopefully will give people a little bit more information. So could you give us a little bit of detail about the impetus of this bill and sort of why you...
I'm sorry, lady, I can't hear you. Ms. Speaker, could you get a little order?
Members would contain their discussions to a quiet whisper while we debate the bill. Thank you.
Yeah. Please ask the question again.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm curious if you could explain to the room sort of what the impetus for the bill is and how you came to file it and sort of what your vision is for moving forward in terms of local municipalities and what they're able to control.
Absolutely. First of all, we have to look at, what is the future? And certainly electric vehicles may be our future. They're probably our future, but they're not certainly our future. There are other technologies that have come along. Today, when you look at the technology that's gone into electric charging or electric vehicle batteries, we've come a long way. We've gone from back when the Volt came out, which was kind of the first one that had to have a little generator in the back to recharge it in order to get 100 miles. Today they claim to go 200 miles, but of course that all depends on whether it's cold out, whether you have stop and go traffic, all these different things. So, I noticed in the Super Bowl over the weekend that Chrysler put out an ad basically saying, are you afraid of electric vehicles? Because everybody has all these concerns about whether or not they're going to go far enough and whether or not they're going to run out. In fact, it showed some people walking, after they'd run out of electricity in their car. What we do know is that if there is a future for electric vehicles, that the battery technology is going to get much better. The technology is going to improve. So today we have electric charging stations that match today's vehicles, but there's certainly it's almost certain that that's going to change. I have an iPhone, and so far I've gone through 3 different types of charging apparatuses for it, and I'm sure there'll be more than that. So what I'm thinking is that this is a little cart before the horse, what we're doing by demanding that these be put in, because they're going to change.
And when you say that, just to clarify, you mean when you say what we're doing, you mean when the county...
When the county makes a mandate upon business. And the other part of that is it proper for a government to tell a business, you have to do something that has nothing to do with your business. It will bring you no profit, it will bring you nothing, which I think is not the role of government. When it comes to building codes and so forth, there's 2 things that building codes are supposed to do. They're supposed to give you safety and protect your health. This really has nothing to do with that. This is just, we kind of like the idea of electric charging, vehicles, so therefore, in order to promote that, we're going to make businesses put these in. I don't think it's the government's responsibility to be the marketing department for General Motors and Chrysler, or BMW, or used to be a big 3. I guess now it's a big 12 or something. But Tesla has taken it upon themselves to put in charging stations across the country. They have them in my district, and they're used. Now, they're specific to their vehicle, but they've done it at their own cost. In fact, when I first came up with this bill, Tesla came to me and said, can you make sure that the bill allows us to pay for these? And we put that in there. And I think that's the proper, the free market should do this, but we shouldn't be demanding that our businesses do it. And just to give you an idea of the cost, there are 2 levels of basically of charging stations. A 4 to 8 hour charging station is really cheap. It's $700 to $2,000. Now that's just for the charging station. Then you have to run conduit under your parking lot. You have to do all that. But when you get up to where it would really be useful, which is a level 3, which charges 30 to 60 minutes, they run $55,000 to $65,000 each. If you go to a 15 or 30 minute station, they run $65,000 to $75,000. But then you have to upgrade your entire electrical system in your business to come up with 480 volts. So, for an example, Lindbergh High School in my district, when this ordinance first came out, was in the midst of building a new high school. So they went to their architect and said, "What will this cost us now?" And the estimate was between $390,000 and $550,000 to put these in. Well, I made a big stink about that, and the St. Louis County changed their ordinance and exempted schools. They didn't exempt churches. And I'll tell you, I have some pretty big churches in town, and they could not afford $500,000 to put in.
So your language would exempt churches?
Would exempt
Okay.
churches, absolutely.
So can you help me understand a little bit of the history of the ordinance? When was it initially implemented or passed in St. Louis County?
It was passed 2 years ago.
Okay.
And it required anybody that redid their parking lot, remodeled their business, or changed occupancy and use of the business had to put in one charging station for every 10 parking spaces. Now, for example, we have a mall that has about 3,000 parking spaces. They would have to put in 300 of these, and that would literally close the mall down. They will never ever make and today they're not expanding, they're not doing anything. And unfortunately, my district sits right on Interstate 270 near the JB Bridge going over to Illinois, so we are a prime area for development, and it's been stagnant because developers don't want to spend this type of money in addition to improving their business.
Okay, and how has the ordinance changed then? So you mentioned that they went back and they exempted some folks. Have there been any other changes to the ordinance?
The changes they made were they exempted schools and they exempted anybody with less than 30 parking spaces.
Okay.
But that did not do much for churches. It did not do anything for shopping centers or any, even hospitals for that matter.
Okay, so your bill is essentially making sure that some businesses are exempted, but also that local municipalities wouldn't have the power to do this in the future. Is that correct?
Right. Now, there's a lot to be said about where we're going with electric charging stations. The technology today, if you notice on your iPhone, you no longer have to plug it in. You can just stick it on a pad. Well, that type of technology exists where they could embed it in the road. And I would suspect that if there's a future for electric vehicles, that's where it's going to go, where you're not going to have to stop and charge. So in the meantime, we're going to ask business to spend $500,000 or more to do this when it may not even be in the future. We really need to get the cart before the horse and not the cart, the other way around.
So without speaking to specifically the issue of this specific ordinance, can you speak a little bit to the sort of how you reconcile, our role here as a legislature? I will say, I don't view our role as a legislature as being here to sort of take power away from local municipalities. I think a lot of us talk about local control a lot, and I think we talk about how we want to make sure that folks in communities are doing what's right for their community. But can you kind of speak a little bit to sort of how you square that without going into the EV thing, just sort of?
Well, one of the things I try not to do is even square that, because basically local government gets their power from the legislature, and it's up to us to say if we think you're out of bounds to bring you back in. So I think we have the right to do that. I think we have the power to do it, and I think we have the obligation to do it.
Okay, thank you. To speak on the bill.
Please proceed, lady.
Thank you so much. So this is a bill that I've heard a few times, and one of the things for me that I'm mostly concerned about is local control here. What we as a legislature have the power to do versus what we really should be doing with our local municipalities. I think that what's right for St. Louis County is certainly not going to be right for maybe Greene County. What's right in Platte County isn't going to be right necessarily for Clay County, which is right next door. We all have different objectives in our communities, and one of my concerns with this bill is setting a precedent for stripping local control away from municipalities. I'm interested in hearing how the conversation goes, but as of right now, I'm not certain I can support this legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on House Committee Substitute House Bill 184. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Speak in favor of the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I would like all my colleagues to support this bill. Representative Jim Murphy is in South St. Louis County.
Gentlemen, we're prohibited from discussing individuals' names on the floor. Please refer to them to the county or the district number.
Understood. The representative from South St. Louis County. I have a number of small businesses that reach out to me daily, and as we know through the COVID years, they've been extremely harmed, and some of the harm has come from local governments, local municipalities. This is another thing that is harming small businesses. I've had a number of small businesses reach out to me and say, I don't have $5-10 grand for a government mandate to put in an EV station in. And so it's crippling their balance sheet, it's crippling their business, and they're already struggling. So I fully support the representative from St. Louis County's bill. And what it's doing is if they don't have the money to do it, then they don't upgrade their buildings, they don't upgrade their parking lots. And if you come through South St. Louis County, you will see that. It looks like a war zone in some of these parking lots because they don't even want to repave their parking lot because they have to put in 10-15 grand worth of electrical vehicle stations. They don't have the money to do it. It's an unnecessary mandate. If they want to do it, that's great. There's plenty of businesses that want to do this. I personally have not seen the demand yet for this. There's multiple EV stations in my district, and I rarely see a car in them. So I think the mandate is a little unnecessary, and I think this helps our small businesses greatly. I ask you to please support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to inquire of the bill sponsor.
Does the bill sponsor yield?
Certainly do.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
My question to you is, first of all, I think this is an important bill, but is your supposition that not only is this bad for business, but that without this bill, local governments would be mandating this requirement, expecting the state to later pay for it as a reimbursement, or assuming that there would be backup funding for this in some way? Is that true?
Well, that's possible. You know, right now the federal government's put $9 billion into paying for electric charging stations along the interstate highways, and I think that's an appropriate thing if they want to do that. Well, I shouldn't say I think it's appropriate spending $9 billion, but if they want to pay for them, I have no problem with that. But I do think that the free market's going to take care of this. If the business feels that putting in electric charging stations is going to attract customers, they're certainly going to do that. But you got to remember that parking lots were designed for customers, first of all. And they have morphed a lot. And, I think one of our colleagues recently tweeted out, he says, have you noticed every time you go in a parking lot, there's less and less spaces? Because now we've got, we've got not only handicap, but we got, the pregnant mom one and the veterans one, and now curbside pickup, and now we're going to say, oh, let's do 10% more in electric charging station. And I don't know what the result of that is. When you can't find a parking space, if you come in with your F-350 pickup truck and park in one of these EV stations, is there going to be fistfights on the street? I don't know. But again, businesses develop their business, they develop their parking lots for their customers, not as fueling stations. We didn't require that we put gas pumps into shopping centers when the gasoline car came about. So let the free market fend for itself. If there's a demand, it'll be there.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the inquiry. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Further discussions. Gentleman from Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To inquire of the bill sponsor.
Does this bill sponsor yield?
Absolutely.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
So I just want to be clear. There are some governmental agencies in the affected area, even though they're outside of municipalities. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And are they exempted from the original ordinance as well?
Not that I'm aware of.
So they would be required as well to put the EV charging stations?
I believe so.
Okay. So this only impacts the unincorporated area of the county and not the 88 municipalities.
Exactly, and St. Louis County is a unique form of government in that the county council passes ordinance that only affect the unincorporated portion of the county. So in this case, the bill was put forth by somebody on the council that had no unincorporated area in her own district. So it was easy for her to say, yeah, everybody should do this except for my people, which happened to be mostly my district. So I think it was blatantly unfair, and there was very little appetite to change it because she got no blowback from her constituents.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Speaker, to comment on the bill.
Please proceed.
It is my privilege to serve on the committee that first heard this bill, and questions were asked. Individuals gave testimony. One gentleman came before us and said that he does own an electric vehicle. He doesn't go anywhere where there's not a charging station available, and he finds them available wherever it is that he needs to go. Furthermore, he testified that from his experience, those businesses that have those availabilities also saw an economic uptick in their economic activities. And if that's the case, that seems to me to be an example of the free market working. I believe in local control. I have fought for local control. I was a city manager for my career. I believe in local control. But I also believe in Dillon's rule. Municipalities, counties, villages, townships, political subdivisions, they are the creatures and the creation of the state. The state is sovereign, not the political subdivisions. And when a political subdivision is going to infringe upon the property rights of private business owners and private property owners, I believe it is the duty of this body to step up and put a stop to that encroachment of power, no matter how local it is from which it originates. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on House Committee Substitute House Bill 184. Gentleman from Boone.
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment ending in .01H. It has been distributed, and I move for its adoption.
The gentleman from Boone has moved for the adoption of House Amendment 1, House Committee Substitute House Bill 184. Further discussion on House Amendment 1. Gentlemen.
This bill will hereby create an electric vehicle charging infrastructure task force. The mission of the task force shall be to promote and development of a comprehensive electric vehicle charging infrastructure plan in Missouri communities by promoting comprehensive infrastructure planning for 21st century and intricacy cooperation.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1. Gentleman from Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To inquire of the gentleman from Boone.
Does the gentleman from Boone yield?
Yes.
Please proceed.
All right. Thank you for bringing this forward, gentlemen. I just feel that this particular amendment is a little duplicitous. We just had the electric vehicle task force that was established as part of the motor fuels tax increase back in 2021. That task force met this past year and just released 253 pages worth of findings on December 31st. Myself and the representative from St. Louis City, the 81st District, were part of that committee. They were part of that task force that released this, and most of what we talked about was this issue of charging stations. So I feel that this amendment is pretty duplicitous, and I don't see a real need for it.
Although I see your point there, we also have a circumstance where we have federal dollars that need to be applied to our municipalities, and I think we need to be in cohesion with the municipalities, the mayors. In this task force, we'll also have Senate appointees, House appointees, and professionals in infrastructure that. And with all this federal money, we need to get it right. And I think with this task force and the state cooperation, we can do that.
Yeah, and the task force that just finished wrapping up its meetings that way and presented its findings, it had 2 senators, 2 House members, and about 15 other members from across the industry and the cities as well that all heard about this. We talked about the Volkswagen funds that were coming back to fund these charging stations we talked about, the federal dollars. All this has already been ground that was just recently tread, and this report was released on December 31st.
And so other than the report, who's have access to this report, and what are they doing with this report at the moment?
It is publicly available on the Department of Revenue's website. They were the agency in charge of organizing it, so it's all up there. It's actually on the computer right in front of you as well.
Okay, so that task force is done, the report's online, and there's no other push towards working with the cities and counties as far as putting in federal dollars.
Right. A task force just issues its recommendations, and that's what was reported on December 31st. So they don't have any legal standing to continue the push after they release their findings and do their studies.
Well, I see your point, except for we need to be pushing right now, especially with the new federal dollars coming in, and making sure that our infrastructure is proper and more efficient, especially when it comes to pushing towards our electrical systems and our grids. And so I understand private businesses and they have their issues, but as a state, we can also make sure the infrastructure is proper.
Let's speak on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
All right, Mr. Speaker, as I said, I feel that this amendment is, while this body does like task force, and we instituted a number of them, this one in particular we just got through doing, and it's only, the ink barely is dried on these 253 pages worth of findings. So I urge the body to vote this amendment down and continue to allow the gentleman from St. Louis County's bill to go forward. Thank you.
Further discussion? Sorry, gentleman from Andrew.
To speak on the amendment and the bill.
Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, the underlying bill came through government efficiency and downsizing, on which I'm the vice chair. And when our chairman started the first hearing for our committee, he said, we are here to protect the people of the state of Missouri. We are to come down in every instance on the side of the people, not the side of more government. This amendment just gives us more government. It gives us a task force to promote electric vehicle charging stations and the like. We don't even know, as has been stated previously, that this technology is the technology of the future. It's what looks like the future technology of today, but we don't know 15, even 5 years down the road, there may be something better come along, an increase in technology. We do not need to have our government entities telling the people, you have to do this and you have to do that on something that it doesn't apply to their business. We have a standing model in this state of letting business do what business does. And requiring businesses to spend money for electric charging stations is not what we're about here in Missouri. We're about the people of Missouri, protecting the people of Missouri, not the government entities that want to put more mandates, more unfunded mandates on the people and the businesses of the state of Missouri. I urge my colleagues to vote down this amendment and vote for the underlying bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1, lady from Platte.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To inquire of the gentleman from Clay if he's still in the room.
Does the gentleman from Clay yield? One moment, lady.
I do.
Please proceed.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I'm not as familiar with this task force as you are, the one that you talked about that has already completed their business. So I'm hoping you can help me understand a few things. You said that they predominantly discussed EV charging stations and sort of that issue. Can you help me understand what came out of that, just in terms of recommendations or how municipalities should be handling these things?
Well, it was 253 pages worth of findings, and just fact-finding was most of what that report was. Obviously, the most of it was how we should be putting more money towards these stations, but nothing in there said anything about forcing businesses to adopt this. It was more about how do we spend the money that is already coming in from the VW revenue funds, from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that passed. How do those extra dollars that are coming down, where best do we need it? Where are the gaps in Missouri's EV system? So a lot more findings along those lines.
So where are those gaps then?
There's a lot. Once you get out of Kansas City and St. Louis and a couple other spots, you start running into gaps pretty quickly. Even where I'm at in my district, I've got one EV. I've got one EV charging station in my district. So that is always something that people have to be aware of, even in a district that's part suburb, part rural. That it is absolutely an issue.
Did it take into consideration, or did it go into sort of down the lane of folks who may live in a community where their homes don't have a garage, or they live in an apartment complex but want to have an electric vehicle? Did it talk about their options and how, as municipalities, we can support those folks?
So we talked about that some, mostly in response to older housing that doesn't have the lines coming into the house to be able to support the wattage necessary for the electrical vehicle charging. So that's something that is definitely on the radar, especially for the utilities. Evergy and Ameren both had spots on this committee as well to bring their insights into it. It is something that they are aware of, that as this technology progresses and becomes more and more in demand that way by the supply and demand system that we have here in place in this country, it's going to create a cascading effect on these utilities and on those older homes.
Okay. Did it go into, or was there any discussion of outside the box ideas? So I know right now we think of putting a charging station maybe at a gas station or at a grocery store or wherever they're landing right now. But what about public streets? For folks who, like I said, don't have a garage, don't have the capacity in their home, live in an apartment complex and don't have access. Was there anything like that?
Nothing that along public streets that I remember that topic coming up. I didn't sit in on every Zoom call that we had on it, but probably about 2/3 of them I sat in on. But what we did talk about, though, was kind of outside the box, especially along interstate routes at these exits that you don't necessarily have. There's a gas station there, but you're in the middle of Warren County. It's going to be hard to find an electric vehicle charging location if you need to stop for a charge. So, trying to think outside the box, whether it's, some places might have the availability of a commuter lot that you can park in, or, be able to direct some of these funds towards other businesses that are right off the interstate that can help folks charge on their way around the country.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Mr. Speaker, to speak briefly on the amendment.
Please proceed.
So it sounds to me like while the previous task force that the gentleman from Clay was speaking of did do some pretty comprehensive work, it occurs to me that we haven't gone far enough. This bill is essentially saying, no, municipalities, you cannot do this. Okay, that's one thing, to just stop something from happening. But it's a whole other thing for government to be proactive and look into what options we can give our people. Earlier the gentleman talked about how the committee was set up to protect the people of Missouri, and I think that that's exactly what this amendment does. It looks to give them options. It looks to give folks options and to actually look into the issue. If we just close our eyes and say it's already been done and we've already thought about it, okay, but we haven't already thought about everything. And I really, really encourage the body to support this very simple amendment. It just adds a task force. It's not about whether or not we support the underlying bill. It's really about making sure Missourians who want the option for electric vehicle charging have it, and have it on the terms that matter most to them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1, House Amendment 1, rather. Gentleman from St. Louis County. Windham District.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to inquire of the bill sponsor.
Please proceed.
Morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
So I think I agree with your bill. I think. But I think that one of the things that is kind of missed here is how slow state government works. So what if we come to a day where everyone's driving electric vehicles?
I believe when that
And
happens,
this is-
that the
hold
free
on,
market's
just
gonna-
real quick, and this is still statute that says that you can't mandate folks have a certain amount of charging per spaces.
It says you can mandate up to 5.
The bill says you can mandate up to 5.
And after that, it would be up to the free market. If there's a demand for more than 5, I'll guarantee you they're going to put in more than 5.
How can you guarantee that?
Because that's the way the free market works. You know, when gasoline cars came about, we didn't demand that anybody build a gas station, but I will tell you that along the interstate highway, there's one on every corner because that's what the market demands. Free enterprise took care of that.
I have trouble with that because if that was the case, then there'd be grocery stores in every neighborhood. If that's just how the free market worked, that because people need to eat, then hey, we have fresh fruit and fresh vegetables everywhere that people eat. But no, it's not necessarily those fresh things. It's Dollar Generals and gas stations that sell fried chicken for food stamps.
I think that's a sad situation. I think we need to address that. But there's other market forces other than just demand involved in that. And we need to address that, and I would be happy to work on that. But that really doesn't represent what the entire market is. You know, when there's a market, free enterprise always takes advantage of an opportunity, and that's just the way this economy works. You know, they didn't build malls out in the middle of the country. They built them where there was traffic. They didn't build gas stations where there wasn't demand. They built them where there was demand. If there's a demand for electric charging stations at a mall, they're going to put them in because they want to attract customers. But today, in the state of Missouri, there are 10,000 electric vehicles. There are 4.6 million gas vehicles. So there's no demand that's going to let the free market do it yet. But once that flips, I'll guarantee you there'll be some response to that'll work in that way.
Yeah, I understand the concept that you're giving, and to a certain extent, I agree with you. I'm just worried about the quality of said good that will have to be everywhere.
You know, our problem is that they're very costly.
Sure.
And whose responsibility is it really the responsibility of a mom and pop store to do this? I don't think so.
Yeah, and that's why I started off by saying I think I might agree with your bill. I more agree with it than not. However, understanding how sticky, if you will, state statutes are, this could be around forever, which may not be a terrible thing because it's...
No. But then again, a hydrogen car may be the future, not an electric car, and then what do we do?
Sure. Then I think that local government is nimble enough to say, oh, we can take this off the books in just a couple of weeks as opposed to state governments.
But they've already made
January
small
through May.
businesses spend millions of dollars on this. It's just not fair. It's just not fair.
Yeah. I hate to kind of go... concept.
No, I know exactly
there,
what you're saying, and I, in a lot of ways, think that way. But the bottom line is that if we want to do this, then we should be doing it on a broad scale, not just demanding it from certain people. It's not the role of government to say to you, Representative, I like blue cars, so therefore you have to own a blue car.
Sure.
Or I think that oil changes have to happen every 30 days, so you should have to do that. I don't think that's our role in getting involved in what we do. If you buy an electric vehicle, that's up to you, but I don't think it's up to me to pay for your charging station.
I don't know. I think there's some gray area there with the example that you gave. I won't go deep into that. It goes to like emissions and clean air and our right to being able to be healthy in our environment. But I'll get out of that rabbit hole, and I'll say that just kind of listening to the conversation and thinking about, again, what I said about government or state government at least being slow and statutes being sticky is saying that I think that we should have a sunset for this bill if it becomes statute. How do you feel about that?
Well, on his?
No, on your bill.
Well, your amendments to...
It's an amendment to his bill, however, or it's an amendment to his amendment, however it applies to your main bill. That says 6 years later, the state legislature should come back and
I don't
say
think
where
that there's ever a time when government should make somebody pay for somebody else's fuel. So I wouldn't be in favor of it, but I'll leave that up to the body.
I don't know that I would characterize it that way. I didn't even hear the end of what you said because I was thinking about the middle of what you said. Because I don't think that.
My basic premise is that it's not the role of government to demand from one business who is not in the car fueling business to supply fuel for a vehicle, and that's what an electric charging station is. It's fuel for an electric vehicle.
Yeah,
so it's asking a business that has nothing to do with that to spend money to do that. And I don't think that's appropriate now. I don't think it'll be appropriate 6 years from now. I don't think it'll be appropriate 100 years from now.
Yeah, but I agree with that. I don't quite think that that's what that is, though. So I don't think this is saying that, let's just say that I have, random store. Let's just say I have a store. I don't think that I'm paying for my customers' electricity for their car.
Well,
I have to have a station, but that could be a partner with Ameren. We could still make the customer pay for it. It doesn't say that you have to give away free
I know, but
electricity.
they cost $65,000 to $75,000.
Yeah.
That's still making me pay for it.
It's making you pay for the station. It's not making you pay for the fuel that goes in the car.
I don't know about you, but $75,000 is a lot of business, a lot of money, and for especially for small businesses, especially startups, things like that.
I agree.
That might prevent them from ever even opening their business.
I agree.
And I don't care if that's today or 6 years from now.
I think that we're a little bit down a rabbit hole, but I think it might be a rabbit hole worth going down because I still don't see that it's making businesses pay for their customers' fuel. I mean, I can have a gas pump. Let's again replace the electric station with gas. The government can say that I have to have a gas pump at my business. It doesn't say that I have to give away gas.
I would oppose that also.
Yeah, I would too. But
okay.
Sticking with what you said about making businesses pay for their customers' fuel, it wouldn't say that I have to give my customers gas. It says that I have to have a gas pump at my business. So,
okay. But what you just said is you would not, if I put a bill out today saying that every shopping center had to put in a gas pump for every 10 spaces,
yeah.
Would you be happy with that?
No.
Okay. Well, it's the same thing to me.
Yeah, and again,
it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah, so let's try to get out of that rabbit hole a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think that we're kind of saying the same thing. Because I even started with saying that I mostly agree with your bill. Yeah. I just think that we should, not even we, in 6 years, the state legislature should come back and say, is this still necessary?
Well, I think in 6 years you're right, that in 6 years we're going to have a much clearer view of where the technology is, what type of requirements are going to be needing for our transportation, and we can revisit it any time between now and then and come up with a bill that's statewide that says this is what you need to do. What mine says is that local government really can't impose these until we know that, till we're at that point.
Sure.
So we can always revisit it and change it later.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I just wanted to have that brief conversation with you. Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment that ends in .03H, and I move for its adoption.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has moved for the adoption of House Amendment 1 to House Amendment 1. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment simply puts a sunset on this bill that says in 6 years after this bill becomes a law, the state legislature should come back, and if they think that this is still an issue that needs to be before the state legislature, then the future legislature can handle it then. And with that, I will of course, take any questions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1 to House Amendment 1. Gentleman from Clay.
To speak on the amendment to the amendment.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I hope everyone was paying attention to the previous conversation because the lack of need for this amendment was made very clear in that conversation. At the end of the day, really what we're dealing with is the tension that exists between those who are more okay with central planning and those who are not okay with central planning. We've been operating a mutt economic system in our country for a very long time, where we've been flirting more and more with the idea of central planning, where we have government entities planning various components of the way in which the economy functions, or a subset of that economy. The fact remains, and we can look at this historically as individuals who aren't necessarily even a big fan of the free market system. Economists, even in that particular camp, would admit that central planning is woefully inept in terms of the kinds of nimbleness and flexibility to be able to adjust to the way the market moves day to day, let alone getting out ahead of something, trying to plan for realities that haven't even happened, and we're trying to anticipate something that's going to take place in a decade or in 2 decades. So at the end of the day, we are here to debate a bill that is limiting political subdivisions from mandating to the private sector that they have to do something. They have to spend their own money to put infrastructure in that they don't have any interest in doing. But because we have municipalities that have bought into the central planning concept, they believe they know better than the small business owner that's being forced to have to do something against their will, against their interest, against their business model. Certainly, if they see that putting in charging stations is a good thing for their business, if it fits within their business plan or business model, they're going to do it. And quite frankly, the manufacturers of EVs are going to be, they are incentivized because they are interested in producing more and more vehicles, to have conversations with entities that are providing goods and services to communities, to go to them and say, hey, listen, why don't we partner on this? We can help you put in some charging stations. We'll help to carry some of the cost. And there's also a way for you to be able to make up some of what you end up having to. Your ROI will be shored up, right? Those types of conversations happen all the time. It does not require the government to facilitate those conversations, for those conversations to take place. So we are here to debate a bill. We're here ultimately to pass bills or to not pass bills. We don't have to worry about what's going to happen in 5 years or so, because next year we as a General Assembly can determine that we don't like what we just did, and we can come back and change it if we believe it's necessary. What we're saying is we shouldn't be in the business of central planning. We shouldn't be in the business of mandating to mom and pop shops that they have to put something in. It would be absolutely ridiculous for us to be on this floor debating whether or not we should require a motel or a hotel or an apartment complex or a grocery store to have to put in 15 gas pumps on their property. We would look at that and go, that's ridiculous. That's not their business. If they want to do that, that's fine, but that's not their business, and the city should not be requiring that of them. But we are doing that with EV charging stations. Why? Because we are at a point in our history where we are becoming more and more sympathetic to the approach of central planning. I, for one, do not embrace the concept of central planning. It is inefficient, it's inappropriate, it violates principles that we hold dear in this building. And for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I would encourage everyone to vote down this amendment to the amendment, vote down the amendment, and pass the gentleman's bill. Thank you.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1 to House Amendment 1. Seeing none, gentlemen, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't give a long thesis statement here. I will just say that this simply takes the handcuffs off of local government after 6 years, and says that if this is still an issue that needs to be before the state legislature, then we debate the issue again. However, we all know that there are statutes on the books. We do it every year where we take statutes off the books that we no longer need. And I think that we're in a body that believes in downsizing state government. So if that's the case, then I believe that this will be a good amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has moved for the adoption of House Amendment 1 to House Amendment 1. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the noes have it. You failed to adopt House Amendment 1 to House Amendment 1, House Committee Substitute to House Bill 184. Further discussion on House Amendment 1 to House Committee Substitute to House Bill 184. Lady from Jackson. St. Louis County.
St. Louis County. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
So I wanted to give the body a demonstration as to the cost that are passed on to small business owners. Install 4 commercial EV charging stations, 2 poles, 2 chargers at each pole. Run 4 50-amp, 240 volts circuits to a charging station underground. Run low voltage wire to EV charging stations. Supply 4 EV chargers and 2 poles. The main building change existing 200 amp sub panel to a new 40 space panel to accommodate each EV charging station. Electrical permits included, trenching $17,000. Trenching also was not included in this bill, but that was the cost. The total cost for a small business owner to install these EV charging stations, $22,435. I yield the mic.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1. Seeing none, gentlemen, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Missouri has responsibilities to encourage choice and free market. We have a unique opportunity with federal state dollars to encourage that, and I think a task force for this opportunity is necessary in order to have the proper infrastructure around the state, and that's the reason for this amendment. And I think that encouragement of free market and choice is important, as stated by my cohorts on the other side. And with that, I renew my motion.
The gentleman from Boone has renewed his motion for the adoption of House Amendment 1 to House Committee Substitute and House Bill 184. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the noes have it. You failed to adopt House Amendment 1 to House Committee Substitute to House Bill 184. Further discussion on House Committee Substitute to House Bill 184. Seeing none, gentleman from St. Louis. Gentleman from St. Louis, please don't whistle.
Sorry about that. You almost missed me again. To inquire the gentleman from South St. Louis County, Murphy District.
Does the bill handler yield?
Absolutely.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How's it going, gentlemen?
Fine. How are you today?
Doing well, thank you. All right, let's just get back to the basics, okay? We agree that burning fossil fuels is bad for the environment.
This has nothing to do with that, but yes, I absolutely believe that.
You agree with that, okay? We know it causes air pollution, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, water pollution, effects on people's health, heart attacks, respiratory disorders, stroke, asthma, and all of those things affect all of us and our grandchildren. I know you have quite a few grandchildren, right?
Absolutely, and I agree. All of those things are bad for me.
Yeah, okay.
As is alcohol,
so we can agree on that.
smoking,
Okay, so when government says we can no longer use asbestos in shingles, does the government then have to pay for the new shingles that are more expensive?
No, they didn't pay for the original ones, and they aren't paying for the replacements, but they didn't make people go back and take their shingles off either. They said when you replace them, you will not have that available.
And same thing with refrigerants. When the government says we have to have new refrigerants, does the government pay for those refrigerants, or do they just require that company or that business to have the new refrigerants that are more expensive?
They did not require that everybody change out their air conditioning to the new. They said when the new ones come out, they shall have this new refrigerant.
I get your point.
I get your point to a certain extent.
So we didn't mandate anybody spend any money. We just said that in the future we will do a better job of manufacturing these.
Okay. So last year we were on the special committee for small businesses, right?
Well, as much of a committee we had, yeah.
Well, and that's my question, because it seems like one of your main points is small businesses, right? Isn't that what we're talking about here? Is we're concerned about small businesses not being able to afford this?
No, I'm talking about a mandate on the public to pay for something that they should not be paying for.
But we're also talking about small businesses and the fact that it's difficult for them to afford that. That's part of it, right?
That's part of it.
And last year, in that special committee for small businesses, how many hearings did we have?
Sir, that has nothing to do with this. I didn't put bills in the committee. I have nothing to do with that.
How many hearings did we have in that committee for small businesses?
Are you saying that no bills concerning small businesses didn't get heard in any committee or just in that committee?
I'm just saying that we had a special committee for small businesses while small businesses are struggling right now, and I'm asking you how many committee hearings we had last year.
Well, sir,
Okay, the answer is one.
It's irrelevant to this bill, so please.
The answer is one. So if this body is really concerned about small businesses, we should maybe consider that and having more committee hearings than one in an entire session.
Well, I think you'll have to take that up with the former speaker.
So you believe in local control, right?
Where appropriate, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Do you believe in local control?
Where appropriate, yes.
Okay, and so where you agree with local control until you don't agree with it, and then you want to mandate things.
I believe that we have the right to oversee that, yes.
Okay. Now, I look at your voting record, and it looked like you voted for the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which...
Freedom, absolutely.
Right, so, but that's the federal government, having laws, and now you're saying... We don't even want to listen to the federal government.
We didn't say they couldn't enforce their laws. We said we wouldn't assist them.
No, it was you cannot enforce new laws that the federal government has if there's a red flag.
We said we would not enforce them with our law enforcement. They can certainly come in the state and enforce their laws.
Right, but it was...
We didn't change any federal law.
What I'm saying is you're trying to override the local government, and then sometimes, and when it's convenient for you, you try to override the federal government. So there's no consistency there.
Do you have something about this bill?
I sure do. Okay. So, St. Louis, well, first of all, I'll just say this. You want to talk about the sales of EV vehicles?
Right.
EV sales doubled in 2021. Sales kept rising in 2022. 2 million electric cars sold worldwide in the first quarter, up by 3/4 from the same period the year earlier. So these sales are definitely increasing, okay?
I applaud that.
Right. So this is my problem. One, you're moving the state backwards, okay?
I'm not moving the state anywhere.
And two, you're taking away local control. Okay, those are my problems. So
you're taking away the rights of individuals. You're putting a mandate on people to pay things out of their pocket that have nothing to do with them. I think that's an infringement of government on personal right.
I'm glad you brought that up, gentlemen, because I have an amendment. I appreciate the inquiry. Mr. Speaker, to offer an amendment.
Please proceed, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to the environment, I want the state of Missouri to be a leader, not a follower. I want people to be like, wow, look at the state of Missouri. They are really thinking ahead and thinking about the future. And with that, I have an amendment ending in .02H, and I move for its adoption.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has moved for the adoption of House Amendment 2 to House Committee Substitute to House Bill 184. Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Sure. So thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this amendment does is basically says that as opposed to the local governments that are asking for these requirements to pay the bill for it, that the state of Missouri will pay the bill. And I'll tell you why. St. Louis City and St. Louis County is roughly 1.3 million people. And, we have about 6 million people in this state. That's about a little over a sixth of the entire state. But St. Louis City and St. Louis County make up for roughly 45% of the general revenue. So St. Louis pays for almost half of all the money that comes into the state, okay? I think this is a good opportunity to bring some of that money back to St. Louis County and St. Louis City. They are on a tight budget. Right now, the state of Missouri has the biggest surplus that we have ever had in our history. $5 billion just sitting in the bank. And that's why I'm offering this amendment, is for the state of Missouri to pay for these stations, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Further discussion on House Amendment 2. Gentleman from Clay.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, to speak against the amendment.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, so a couple of details. It would be absolutely foolish for this body to sign over our appropriation authority to any political subdivision to where we are on the hook for any decision that they're making in general or in particular regarding these stations. Who in their right mind would assume that this is the route we need to go, where we say to municipalities, counties, any political subdivision, if you pass an ordinance, that, and it doesn't matter how much it's going to cost, we have no part to play in this, you pass the ordinance and we're going to be on the hook to pay. I mean, it says shall. We shall pay the bill. We are not going to sign over our appropriation authority. That is a constitutional responsibility that we have. This is a huge mistake, and it is woefully underdeveloped in terms of its thought process, in terms of what is being attempted here. Secondarily, this whole discussion related to local control. Are we for local control or are we not for local control? Local control starts at the individual. And you are absolutely able to say you are in support of local control when you say, I am absolutely in support of a small business owner, a medium-sized business owner, or a big business owner, or a conglomerate to make decisions as to how they're going to do business with respect to whether or not they're going to put EV stations in. It's local control. They get to control the decision they're going to be making. The individual, that's where local control starts. Political subdivisions are a creation of the state. The reference to SEPA is a complete mischaracterization regarding our relationship with the federal government. The federal government didn't create the states. States are not political subdivisions of the federal government. We created the federal government. So, local control is important, principially. We, in principle, work to protect local control. And when local control is eroded by a political subdivision that is disrespecting local control, i.e., at the individual level, we have the responsibility of protecting those individuals who are having their rights encroached upon by those local municipalities or political subdivisions beyond the municipalities. So, Mr. Speaker, I know that I can go on and on and on and on and on and on, but I'm going to choose to stop at this point and just simply say, let's vote this amendment down. Let's support local control. Let's operate with some degree of reasonableness on this and support the gentleman's bill without these amendments. Thank you.
Further discussion on House Amendment 2. Gentleman from Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to speak on the amendment.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So the gentleman here has an amendment that says any electric charging stations. There is the IEEC, which is the International Energy Conservation Codes that are coming out, which cities are adopting them, like Kansas City has adopted them. This would now cause a state to pay for every new home, a new home built, to pay for that electric charging station if they adopted these ordinances. This is absolutely ridiculous. I hope the body votes this down. Thank you.
Further discussion on House Amendment 2. Seeing none, gentlemen, you're recognized in reading your motion.
What that gentleman just said over there is not true. All I'm doing is taking the exact bill that the gentleman from South St. Louis County is saying and simply saying, as opposed to the local government paying for it, that the state of Missouri that has $5 billion in the bank will pay for it. That's it. There's no extra stations. There's no more stations. It's the exact same thing. The state of Missouri needs to be a leader when it comes to these things, and we can be a leader when it comes to these things, and I renew my motion.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has renewed his motion for the adoption of House Amendment 2 to House Committee Substitute House Bill 184. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the noes have it. You failed to adopt House Amendment 2. Further discussion on House Committee Substitute House Bill 184. Gentleman from St. Louis County, you're recognized to renew your motion. Sorry, lady. Lady from St. Louis.
To inquire of the lady from St. Louis County, District 68. 67.
The lady from St. Louis. Yep.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning, lady.
Good morning.
So we, like the gentleman from St. Louis County, live in St. Louis County, and we've had discussions about this. Now, you are a small business owner, am I correct?
That is correct.
I'm very curious because I'm not a small business owner, but I do know, because I received emails about it, the implications this would have on small business owners like barbershop owners, beauty salon owners, nail salon owners, daycare, individuals who open a small restaurant or something to that effect. Particularly in urban areas or under-resourced areas, especially in a time, for example, we're talking about the shortage of daycare providers. What does a bill, if we don't vote in support of this bill, what would this do, or what impact would it have on your small business or you as a small business owner?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. Less than 1% of my constituents own an electrical vehicle. Putting in these, or the requirements to have these EV charging stations, would definitely deter my constituents from opening small businesses within my area, which has a domino effect as well. So what we're saying is, in St. Louis County, unincorporated areas, unless you want to install EV charging stations, you cannot open a business.
So for us and for our community, where we already struggle to open small businesses, if we qualify for a loan, I'm wondering if we would have to roll this into a loan and plus interest, and then have to pay for the charging station. Is there a return on that investment? Who knows? Because like you, there's not many electric vehicles coming down South Florissant or on West Florissant, unless they're going in and out of Emerson. But they don't live where we live. When we're talking about providing child care and the lack thereof, and then turning over in the St. Louis County ordinance, I don't recall seeing anything that exempted things like child care facilities. So to make them then have to purchase this, and we don't know who's stopping at those charging stations, because it's not like we have a right to look if they can stop at the charging stations, depending on what type of business it is, should they be there or not. It's not like a gas station, it is a business. What I'm hearing from you, especially in your earlier statements, is that there are some concerns, particularly for those of us in urban areas or lower income or lower resource areas, when we're trying to provide services to those areas so they won't be underserved. This is a barrier that may price individuals who are interested in doing that out of coming to these areas to provide it, because frankly, even if they get funds from those charging stations, because the infrequent activity of charged vehicles or electric vehicles in our area, they just wouldn't get a return on that investment.
That is correct. I do want to point out that when a consumer purchases a electrical vehicle, they have the option to have that charging station installed in their home. Also, there are apps that these purchasers can download and find electrical vehicles along their route. So we're talking about installing two different types of electrical charging stations. One of them is EV1 and EV2. So the less voltage, of course, quite naturally would be the cheaper one. But it takes about 6 to 8 hours for your car to charge up fully.
Okay.
Okay? So imagine having someone at your business for 6 to 8 hours or more. Not only that, but the level 2 charging station is around $25,000 and it charges within an hour. As a small business owner, which one would you choose?
Frankly, I wouldn't choose either of them, but obviously I would take the one that wouldn't occupy a space for a customer or a parent or a consumer of any kind for the least amount of time. And again, my concern with that is even if there are funds to be received, which I'm sure some of which will be taxed by the municipality, that it just wouldn't be a big enough return on the investment, in as much would cause potential business owners to either not open at all or not open in an area where the commodity or the service is needed the most.
Absolutely.
So where we need childcare the most, we don't have, we have maybe a negligible amount of electric vehicles coming through there. So if I'm going to open a child care facility, I'm going to open it where there are more electric vehicles to get a return on my investment.
And absolutely. And another thing is that when, as a small business owner, if I install these charging stations, I can charge, right, a certain amount. But if my area is flooded, if there's a huge influx of installing EV charging stations, imagine what my return would look like.
For sure. And to your point, where it becomes competitive, you still have to have that charging station, but if they go to the cheaper charging station or the one with the most, whatever the case may be, you just have this charging station sitting here that you had to pay for. And that also goes with the risk of just opening a business and hoping that people utilize your business in the first place. Again, I personally, lady, am not saying that I'm not, in support of efforts to curtail climate change. I'm just not sure that this is the particular way to do it in under-resourced areas because we've already been priced out of so much. I find this to be another barrier for a situation that we frankly don't have. I'm uncomfortable doing one of these greater good type votes when my community is suffering. So I'm going to join you in supporting this bill.
Thank you so much.
Further discussion? Seeing none. Gentleman from St. Louis County, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It was a great debate. Obviously, this is an infringement upon our citizens from local government, and we need to correct that. And with that, I close.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has moved for the adoption of House Committee Substitute to House Bill 184. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted House Committee Substitute to House Bill 184. Gentleman from St. Louis County, you're recognized to renew your motion.
I renew my motion.
The gentleman from St. Louis County has renewed his motion for the perfection and printing of House Committee Substitute to House Bill 184. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. You've perfected and printed House Committee Substitute to House Bill 184. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be a special announcement. I ask you to recognize the gentleman from Green, District 137, for a special announcement.
Gentleman from Green.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 37 years ago today, during a terrible snowstorm in Springfield, Missouri, a young man straight off the farm somehow got a beautiful Southern belle to agree to be his wife. They selected that date, not understanding or even recognizing that it was Valentine's Day. It was, in fact, the last Friday night before he began his service in the United States Navy. She said, "I do." I said, "I do." And though she deserves a statue somewhere for putting up with me for all these years, and this is the first year in a very long time that we are not able to be together on this date, I'm hoping that my colleagues will join me in wishing my wife, the mother and grandmother of the family with which we've been blessed, a very happy 37th anniversary on this Valentine's Day.
Lady from Green, happy anniversary. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be House Bills for Perfection Informal. I ask you to recognize the gentleman from Clay for a motion on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 640 and 729.
Gentleman from Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that House Bill 640 be perfected and printed.
The gentleman from Clay has moved for the perfection and printing of House Bill 640. Gentleman from Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that House Committee Substitute for House Bill 640 and 729 be adopted.
The gentleman from Clay has moved for the adoption of House Committee Substitute House Bill 640. Gentleman from Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the title of House Committee Sub for House Bill 640, 729 be agreed to.
The gentleman from Clay has moved for the adoption of the title House Committee Substitute House Bill 640. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak on
Jackson.
the bill. Speak on the bill.
We're discussing the title, gentlemen. Further discussion on the title. Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting the title, please signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the title has been adopted. Gentleman from Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill does several things. Basically, it kind of reworks the compensation construct for the Kansas City Police Department. The bill removes also the age requirement of being under 60 years of age to become the chief of police for the Kansas City Police Department. The bill also eliminates the current authorized salary ceiling for the Kansas City Police Chief and allows the Board of Police Commissioners to establish a salary ceiling by resolution. More specifically, with the Chief of Police, it does two things. I just mentioned that it removes the age requirement of being 60 years of age. It's kind of interesting, when I was kind of researching this bill a little bit, I tried to find where the 60 years of age came from, why it was put in, when was it put in, and for the life of me, I couldn't find anybody, and I talked to some folks that have been around 30, 40 years representing the Kansas City Police Department, and no one seems to know why, where it is in there. I've heard some theories, but nothing really definitive. Everyone I have talked to seems to be in agreement that we probably need to remove the 60 years of age requirement. At best, that's going to invoke criticism. At worst, litigation. I think in 2023, we probably need to remove that. Also, in reference to the Chief of Police, Kansas City, if you did not know, just hired a new Chief of Police here recently. And from what I've been told, talking to the supposed experts, Kansas City, because of this statute, the ceiling that we have in what the chief could be paid is not even near on par with chiefs of similar cities around the country. So in relationship to the chief of police, we're removing the 60 years of age requirement, or in terms of you cannot be over 60 years of age, and we're going to remove the ceiling, that salary cap, from what the chief could be paid. Addition to that, also this bill goes a little bit further in removing the salary caps for other officers, from lieutenant colonels all the way down to detectives, investigators, and police officers, first-year folks on the force. What it does is it removes the salary caps that are currently in statute. In doing that, we are then transferring authority to set basically the guidelines, the ceilings that may come into place. We're going to transfer that authority to the Police Board of Commissioners. So I've heard a lot about local control the last hour or so. We're moving this from the state to the Police Board of Commissioners. They're going to set the salary guidelines, and the hopes with this bill, the hope is that they are going to set a very, very aggressive, competitive salary schedule from the chief all the way down to try to bring officers in to the Kansas City Police Department. Why do we need this bill? Well, I just hinted at it a little bit. Recruitment and retention. Kansas City currently, I even hate to say this, Kansas City currently is down 254 police officers. Kansas City, obviously, Kansas, we border Kansas, but there are a ton of municipalities right around Kansas City, Missouri. On the Kansas side, the Missouri side, and the Kansas City Police Department is just bleeding officers. They're hemorrhaging officers. So the hope is with a better
in my opinion, I would like to see the best salary schedule in the Kansas City metro area. Hopefully we can use that to help with recruitment, and hopefully we can keep people on the force longer rather than taking early retirements, things of that nature. Also, this bill, it just makes sense. It's practical. It's expedient. Every 4, 5, 6 years, the Kansas City Police Department should not need to trot down here and ask us to up the ceilings for their pay schedule. So this only makes sense. It's putting it with the Kansas City Police Board of Commissioners where it probably should be, to where they can then set up a salary schedule that hopefully will be competitive and bring people in. And last thing I'll say is, every once in a while it's a little refreshing to have a bill that it seems like gets wide consensus. When this was in committee, it came out of committee unanimous. Everybody seems on board with this bill. Kansas City Police Department, the Police Board of Commissioners, Fraternal Order of Police in Kansas City, even himself, Mayor Quentin Lucas, came down and testified in support of this bill. This seems like it's a win-win. It's a direction we should go, and I hope for your support with this bill. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, I also have an amendment ending in .01H. It has been distributed, and I move for its adoption.
The gentleman from Clay has moved for the adoption of House Amendment 1. Gentleman from Clay.
Mr. Speaker, this is an emergency clause, and may I speak to it?
Please proceed.
The reason we need this emergency clause is, boy, I've heard a lot about public safety here, in Jeff City the last several weeks. And I want to remind everybody in this chamber, Kansas City is at war against violent crime. Last year in 2022, we had the second highest homicide rate in the city's history. We had 169 homicides last year in Kansas City. That is unacceptable. And again, with so many officers that we don't have in the force, we need relief now. We need relief in Kansas City for the men and women who are daily out there protecting and serving. And again, I get it. A salary schedule, it's not the panacea to solve the crime issue in Kansas City. I understand that, but it will help. It will help. So I urge you, when this emergency clause comes up for a vote on Thursday, please consider it. It will, obviously, the salary schedule help with recruitment and retention. And also, like I mentioned a bit ago, we just hired a new police chief, woefully probably underpaid. The sooner that the police board can incorporate a new salary structure in, renegotiate, I'm assuming, a new contract with the police chief, but the sooner that they can roll that out, I mean, hopefully within weeks would be fantastic. The sooner they can do that, the better off we will be. Because again, we need to do everything we can to help the Kansas City Police Department. Keep officers, recruit officers, like I said. And folks, I get it. This is Kansas City. This is specific to Kansas City. But I would remind everybody, no matter where you're at, down in the Boot Hill, you're in mid-Missouri, St. Louis, please remember, a threat to public safety anywhere is a threat to public safety everywhere. I appreciate your support. Thank you.
The gentleman from Clay. Okay. Further discussion on House Amendment 2. Lady from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To inquire of the amendment maker.
This gentleman from Clay yield.
I do.
Please
Thank
proceed.
you, gentlemen. Can you please just go over, I know you gave your speech, very wonderful, but could you go over exactly what this amendment does?
I can.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, I don't know how detailed you want me to be.
And be as detailed as possible. I mean, we're changing law right now.
Okay, so with the Kansas City Police Chief, like I enumerated just a second ago, there is an age stipulation to where if you were hired, you cannot be 60 years old or older. We're going to remove that. I think that's very justified. I've had really nobody say any opposition to that. And then also, we're removing the maximum salary that is currently in statute. It's around $188,000. We're going to remove that, and then the Kansas City Police Board of Commissioners, 5-member group, one of which is the mayor, 4 individuals appointed by the governor, they will set the salary then through negotiation and whatnot, and by resolution, they will do that themselves with the police chief.
And we're changing their cost too, in that, right? The commissioner's cost of salary as well?
Well, I'm sure that salary is going to go up.
Oh, so
yeah, that salary I'm sure will go up.
Okay, so we're changing the chief of police.
Yep.
And we're changing the commissioner's salary also.
Oh, no, nothing with the commissioners. They will just negotiate the salary with the chief.
Okay. Okay. Why the reduction of the age? Why the removal of the age limit?
Well, I think it only makes sense. I mean, 60 is the new 40, right? I mean, I'm 50.
60 is just 60.
No. I'm 57. I'm in the prime of my life right now. I'm the picture of health.
I love that for you, but if necessary, I'm going to let you finish. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying that why would you limit it to 60? I mean, there's probably many very qualified candidates to be the chief of police that may be 61. Does it make sense to eliminate those candidates?
Okay. Okay. I hear you. All right. That's interesting. So, quick question.
Yeah.
We're passing a law about the chief of police for Kansas City.
Yeah.
And we're passing one law in statute for Kansas City specifically, right?
Yes.
Would you think that it might be better for Kansas Cityans and the city of Kansas City to be able to have the autonomy to be able to do that as their own entity and not have to come to the state to do that?
Well, that's exactly what we're doing. We are placing this in the hands of the Police Board of Commissioners. We no longer will need to do this. So you're exactly right. That's what we're doing. We're putting, in essence, a little bit of local control here, depending on how you maybe view the Police Board of Commissioners, but it certainly is local.
Yeah. So technically it's not really local control because it's the commissioners, but I get that the mayor gets to appoint somebody, so that's the local control aspect, as people like to say. And then I think that there is some nuance around the fact that the commissioners are a part of the locals because now let me backtrack here. Do the commissioners, are they required to reside in the city of Kansas City?
Yes.
They are required to reside there. Okay.
Yeah, they are residents of Kansas City.
And the chief of police, the reason for this bill is because the chief of police, when you all ask for a new chief, which is the new chief that's coming in, this is trying to make you all more competitive?
Well, we've already hired a new chief.
And how much is he asking for? She, excuse me. Yes. That was very sexist of me by saying he.
Yeah.
I can admit that. She, what is she requiring as her pay?
What is her salary?
What is she asking for is the reason why we're trying to change the statute.
I'm not privy to those conversations.
Okay, because I would think that we wouldn't necessarily have to change it if she's already been given a salary idea of what her salary will look like, unless it goes outside the bounds of what is required under statute.
Well, even take her out of it. I mean, right now, obviously, she's constrained or restricted with her salary by this statute. So she is certainly under the ceiling that is in here. Where her salary is at, I do not know. But again, that's what we're trying to change. We're just trying to take it out of our hands and move it to the Police Board of Commissioners. That's really all we're trying to do.
I get that. So wouldn't it be, just humor me, better if we just didn't have the Police Board of Commissioners and we wouldn't be having to have this conversation on the floor, and Kansas City could just do what they want without the state's input?
I understand your argument, and I understand where you're trying to go, but I get it. I'm not necessarily sure if this is a local versus state control time to have this conversation. We're just worrying about salaries for police officers in this bill.
I get it, but in a sense, it is a local versus state, because we're here asking the state to change statute for one position. And if we didn't have control over Kansas City Police Department, they could just do this on their own without us. I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm just making the correlation of the fact that we're going to end up trying to do this again for other places in the state, which is, just, it's different. So I appreciate that, gentlemen. Mr. Speaker, briefly to speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I just want us to just have an inkling of the fact that we are having a conversation about one position. We're changing statute for one position where Kansas City themselves, the Kansas Cityans, the mayor, whomever else, would have the autonomy to be able to do this themselves if we didn't have control over Kansas City Police Department. I think that they've asked for it more than one time, and I don't have a dog in the fight, but I will be voting no against this bill because I don't believe that this is something that we should be doing. I believe Kansas City should be doing this, and I also think that it's imperative for us to set a precedent of how we're going to raise other people's pay, and yet we can't do that in other places. So I understand the gentleman's position. I support good police officers in trying to attract and hire and make ourselves competitive. However, I just don't think that we need to do this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on House Amendment 1. Gentleman from Jasper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Very briefly, Mr. Speaker, what the current status says, in effect, is you cannot be police chief of Kansas City if you have more than 40 years of experience. If you have 41 years of experience or 42 years of experience or 43 years, we don't want to talk to you. That's utterly ridiculous. And frankly, I have strong feelings about this, as you might expect, because it might otherwise have prevented me from coming to Missouri. So I support the gentleman's bill wholeheartedly.
Further discussion on House Amendment 2. Lady from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to inquire of the bill sponsor, please.
Please proceed.
Thank you for taking my inquiry, gentlemen.
Absolutely.
I think I understand what you're doing here, and I appreciate the support for our Kansas City Police. We need that. But I want to follow up a little bit on your previous inquiry. And a few things that you said in your introducing the bill.
Yeah.
One thing that you said was that they would negotiate a new contract with the current chief. Did you say that?
I said I think that could happen. I'm not totally concrete on that, but that would be my guess, that they may renegotiate that contract. That's just me supposing that.
But you're not saying. My concern is that how this, if we pass this, how this impacts the current contract with the current chief of police.
Yeah, and I don't know the specifics on that. I really don't. I've had some, informal discussions with people, and I was I inferred that her contract may be renegotiated if this does go through. But again, I'm not sure on that.
It makes me a little nervous. If they open up her contract, then does that mean it's open up for other people to apply?
Oh, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the purpose would be just to try to make sure that we have a chief that's going to stick around for a while. We don't want a revolving door, people coming in every 2-3 years, gone. Some stability would be nice, right?
Yeah, I am very optimistic about our new chief and her
And
style.
again, I don't know how long I don't know if that's an annual contract. Was that a 1-year contract? I'm not sure. Maybe it would be another year. Then they would renegotiate with a different ceiling that they can work underneath. So, like I said, I'm sure there's going to be a renegotiation at some point. It may be a month from now. It may be 15 months from now.
It would help to know that, since you're also asking for an emergency clause. It would help to know if we're also authorizing opening up the contract immediately.
Right.
So if you could get that information, that would be appreciated.
I will try to do that.
Thank you. And then my other question is, when you were talking about how this was going to benefit not just the chief, but the force, because it would make us more attractive, does this also raise the pay of the officers?
Yes. Yeah. And again, it's all dependent on what the Police Board of Commissioners will do. I mean, we're not necessarily raising the salary schedule. We're just eliminating the ceiling. So yeah, it would eliminate the ceiling from lieutenant colonels, majors, captains, sergeants, master patrol, master detectives, detectives, investigators, and first-year police officers on the force. If you look at the statute, there's a floor and a ceiling in which their salary range must fall. All we're doing is eliminating the ceiling and then putting the responsibility to the Police Board of Commissioners to set what they feel is an appropriate salary schedule.
And I appreciate that. I think that salary ceilings can be troublesome. Even salary minimums sometimes can be troublesome when we look at what's going on with our teachers, for example, and just raising the base pay has become a controversial issue in this body, which is hard to understand from my point of view, but that's what happens when we place these things in statute and under the control of a larger governing body, right? So I stand with the lady from St. Louis on this would be much more efficient if the police force was under local control. I think we wouldn't, first of all, we wouldn't be having this discussion, and second of all, it would be more, it would fit better with our community and our community's standard of living and our community's median pay and the way that our community interacts with, has a relationship with their peace officers, which is really important because, you know, we had in the State of the Judiciary, the Chief Justice talked about respect for the rule of law, and that's what keeps us together. But the thing is, you have to trust the people who are enforcing the rule of law in order to have that respect. So I appreciate what you're doing. I think I think it's an urgent issue, and I plan to support your bill. But I hope you will also keep an open mind about letting Kansas City have control over its own police force. And appreciate the inquiry. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. Lady from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak on the bill?
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, I've been here a couple years now, so I've got to see how this has kind of all been teed up. So, of course, Kansas City hasn't had local control, maybe because of the mafia, maybe because of war on drugs. But historically, we have seen how state-sanctioned police departments historically interact with the constituency that they serve. And historically, it has not been positive. About 2 years ago, we were asked to take away the residency requirements for the Kansas City Police Department. For those who don't know, Kansas City is actually kind of strategically built so that our suburbs, you can have a Kansas City address and then send your kid to a Lee Summit school. So there was the argument of, well, KCPS is unaccredited, so we need to make sure that we can take care of our families. So we can't live in the district because there's not good resources in the district. Well, now KCPS is accredited, and there is no longer a cop car on my block to keep my block safe. and there is no longer a cop living on my block, so that they can understand I am protecting my neighbors, not going into work to defend myself from the enemy. Last year, this body then said on top of that, also, hey, Kansas City, we're going to mandate that you put 25% of your revenue, because it is Kansas City revenue that pays for this state-sanctioned police. So also, not only do they not have to live in the district, not only can you not vote for the chief, but also more of our money is going to go directly to them. Blank check. And now, the new BART is, let's give them a pay raise, because that will help recruit better people for the force. Well, then I'm confused as I guess to why we cut the pay raises for the legislator, because that would then be the same. We could recruit better legislators if we had a pay raise. But the resounding theme is that every time a new concession is made, no recruitment numbers increase. So there's no control, there's no residency. They as a whole get more of the city budget, and now they get a pay raise. And recruiting numbers have not increased. That's because it's not paying cops that makes people better. It's having better people. It's having people who care. It's having the community trust that law enforcement agency so that they want to engage in the process. I knew legislators made no money, but since my grandmother was a legislator and my uncle was a legislator, it was in my blood, and I'm military, it's in my blood to serve. I don't do it for the $38,000 that we make. I do it because I love this work, and civic engagement is what is important to me. So I stand in strong opposition to this bill, because it sounds like it's just making the job more cushioned instead of actually focusing on the real things, which are impartial bias training and actually building up relations in the community. So with that, I completely stand in opposition of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion. Gentleman, a lady from Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To inquire of the bill handler, the gentleman from
Does
Clay.
the gentleman from Clay yield?
I do.
Please proceed.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, lady. Sorry.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Good. Well, as one Clay representative to another, I just want to say I really appreciate you bringing this bill forward.
Thank you.
This is something that I've heard a lot from our police officers in Kansas City as to the restrictions placed on them in terms of salary because of already existing statute.
Correct.
So that's one of the things I just wanted to have a conversation with you about. While I understand and certainly have shared the sentiment of frustration that our Kansas City police is not under local control, this really is a separate conversation. This is simply making changes to current statute
Right.
to make sure that we have an aggressive and a competitive salary schedule.
I totally agree. Yeah.
So, gentlemen, when we talk about trying to recruit and retain our police officers in Kansas City today, can you, again, share just those challenges that they're faced with? And I think it's important for everybody to understand just the geographical complexities of Kansas City and the surrounding municipalities when you're competing.
Well, like I said earlier, they're around 254 police officers down right now from where they should be at full-time employment or equivalency, I think they refer to it as. In Kansas City, it just has municipality after municipality surrounding it. I mean, you can go work in Lee Summit, Blue Springs, hop into Kansas, go over to Overland Park, wherever. And again, I'm not minimizing the police work there, but I mean, there's some challenges with the Kansas City, as a Kansas City Police Department. They have certainly some issues that maybe are not seen on some of the other police forces.
Sure.
So the bottom line is they're doing a tough work, tough job, and it comes down to pure economics, right? I mean, if you can go work in Lee Summit and make $5-10 grand more with a lot less headaches, why would you not do that? You know, it only makes sense. So we need to sweeten the pot a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't hurt, right? It's going to help.
Absolutely. And one of the things, and I appreciate the gentleman from Jackson bringing his bill forward, because this isn't just talking about the police chief. I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding there.
Right.
Certainly we should be able to raise the age of the chief. I hope she serves for quite some time, well past 60. As well as the salary. But this is really just talking about supporting our rank and file police officers who are doing tough jobs every single day, trying to keep our city safe. And this is really about them. And so, again, I do see this as more local control. I see it going back in our Police Board of Commissioners can go back and say, now, we're no longer restrained by the statute that this is our max cap. Right. And it gives that power back to them, and it allows them to make sure that all our salaries in Kansas City are not just competitive, but they're the best out there.
That's my hope.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. I support your bill. I support the emergency clause. Appreciate you bringing it forward today.
Thank you, lady.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on House Committee Substitute House Bill 640. House Amendment 1. Seeing none. Oh, lady from Jefferson.
To inquire of the bill sponsor.
This is the gentleman from Clay Yield.
I do.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So this bill, it changes the structure of the salaries a little bit, right?
Well, it's yet to be seen. I mean, we're just removing the ceiling for various positions from the chief on down, putting it in the hands of the Police Board of Commissioners. And again, hopefully they'll come up with a more than competitive salary schedule for KCPD.
So where does the money for these salaries come from?
Ultimately from the city of Kansas City.
Okay, so we're letting the people that are closer to the actual appropriation make these decisions. Is that
Absolutely.
correct?
This has a little element of local control to it.
Right. Okay. And I can just speak on behalf of my area of the state. I know that we also have problems recruiting and retaining police officers, and so it's just a really difficult time for law enforcement right now. And if this is what's needed to retain, I don't think that there's a problem. And with respect to the language about the over 60 being removed, the way I read it, the original language was only when they were appointed they had to be under the age of 60. I didn't see anything in the way that the original language was that said that they would have to retire at 60. Is that the current case?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they would have to retire at 60. But there is something that so you're saying if the chief was chief and then became 60?
Yes.
Yeah,
what happens then?
I think there's something, and don't quote me on this, but if that did happen, I think the chief would have to do like a yearly physical or something just to kind of show, I guess, that they're still fit to do the job. And again, I think herein lies the problem. Why would you put this arbitrary age of 60, for example, on when you can or cannot be appointed to the chief of police? Again, in today's, I think that's problematic. I think it's problematic on a lot of different areas.
Thank you.
Further discussion. Gentleman from Pike.
To speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
I just want to point out that Tom Selleck is almost 80 and doing a tremendous job in New York City. Thank you.
Further discussion. Seeing none, gentleman from Clay, you're recognized to close on House Amendment 1.
I renew my motion.
The gentleman from Clay has renewed his motion on House Amendment 1, House Committee Substitute House Bill 640. All those in favor will signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted House Amendment 1 to House Committee Substitute House Bill 640. Further discussion on House Committee Substitute House Bill 640. Seeing none, gentleman from Clay. Gentleman from St. Louis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to inquire of the bill sponsor.
Does the bill sponsor yield?
I do.
Please proceed.
Hey, gentlemen.
Hey, gentlemen, how are you?
Good, thank you. Man, how are you?
I'm sorry?
You asked how I was, and I said good. I felt rude because I didn't ask you how you were doing. So
I'm doing good. I'm doing all right. Thank you for asking.
Good. So I heard it come up. I don't think it was you that kind of asked this question out into. But do you know why the Kansas City Police Department originally went under state control?
Well, I've read numerous articles as to why, and there seems to be some speculation. I've heard that things go clear back to the Civil War. I've heard the Pendergast era. Obviously, we went to local control during the Pendergast era and then went back to state because of the corruption at the city level, I think specifically with the city council. So again, I've heard different stories as to why how that evolved. Let me say that.
Okay, so originally, if the question was originally, then it would date back to the Civil War, right?
Right.
And then another question: do you know how many sections? So, Chapter 84 in our revised statutes for the state of Missouri. Chapter 84 is police departments in St. Louis and Kansas City.
Right.
Do you know how many sections are just for Kansas City?
Not off the top of my head, I do not know.
49 sections just dealing with the city of Kansas City.
Okay.
And I believe it was 48 more for the city of St. Louis that are not operable because of the state vote that took place to take St. Louis out of state control. So, do you believe in small government?
Yeah, when appropriate.
Okay. And do you believe that 48 sections just for one police department aids in small government?
Well, I understand where you're going with the question, but at times when I believe there is overwhelming concern about the ability of the local government or maybe local officials doing their due diligence and being appropriate with an agency such as the Kansas City Police Department, at times it may necessitate another agency overseeing that.
Okay. So, do the people in the local jurisdiction have any ability to vote out the people that they believe are behind those nefarious actions?
Well, I'm not totally sure what you mean by that, but
I'll explain it a little bit. So you said that if people in Kansas City, I'm guessing, let's just say Kansas City, if people are worried about their local government officials not being great stewards of their tax dollars in terms of policing, then don't they have ramifications in being able to vote those people out?
They could.
Would they if they were under local control?
Yeah, they could.
But they don't at this time because the governor appoints and is it the mayor of Kansas City appoints? I couldn't find it within this 49 different statutes.
I'm sorry, gentlemen, was there a question there?
Yes. The question was, does the system of having a state police board give more local control to, or more control over who will be controlling their police department to the people of Kansas City, or less control to the people of Kansas City over who will be controlling their police department?
Gentlemen, I totally understand your line of questioning and where it's coming from and why. But what I'm having trouble understanding is how it necessarily relates to the bill specifically and upping the salary, hopefully, for Kansas City police officers. And shifting the authority to do that from this legislative body to the Kansas City Police Board of Commissioners. I mean, you're trying to get me to go down a local versus state control rabbit hole. That's really not, I don't think, the purpose of this bill. That's a debate to have at another time, and I'm sure we will have that, but I don't think it's really within the scope of this bill, with respect.
Okay, I thank you for the respect. So it has to do with this bill in my mind because I can't vote to raise or lift the restriction on Kansas City police because I shouldn't have anything to do with that. Do you understand how it relates now? I don't feel like I, as a state legislator that was voted upon by the people of 36,000 in St. Louis County, should have anything to do with what's going on in Jackson County, a long way away.
I guess I see what you're saying, and
so even if that's just fixing something here or there, I don't feel like every 10 years we should have to fix something here or there as a member of this.
Well, I think if I understand you correctly, you're saying that even though you're an elected member of this legislative body, you feel like you really don't or should not need to have any say or control or jurisdiction of what's happening in Kansas City. Is that what you're saying?
Yes and no. So yes, but no. So let me explain that to you. Yes, we should have some authority over what Kansas City is doing because it's within the state of Missouri. However, I don't think that Kansas City or St. Louis or any other municipality is so unique that we have to put a chapter in state statute that says this is how we're going to control this one municipality. I think that if it's the best system of doing things, then it should be in all the municipalities. All the municipalities should have state-appointed boards if that's the best way of doing things that keeps out corruption. No, I think the opposite way. I think that local control, where you can easily vote out the person that you think is having these nefarious options, is the better way. So,
well, gentlemen, then I would assume, or I would hope, that maybe you would support this bill because it's kind of doing exactly what you're advocating for. Oh. It is shifting control from this chamber to the Kansas City Police Board of Commissioners, which is there locally in Kansas City. Everyone there on that police board is a resident of Kansas City, including the mayor, duly elected mayor.
Who appoints those members to the board?
Well, you know who appoints those people.
No, I don't.
The governor, obviously.
Okay.
Okay, now are we going to have a Republican governor in the state of Missouri in perpetuity?
Well, I'm not worried about the party as much because, just breezing over this article, it says that state control was originally sponsored by Democrats and was denounced when introduced. So it's not as much about party, it's about a person that has the governor, whether Democrat, Republican, Independent, Constitution Party, shouldn't be able to, in my opinion, shouldn't be able to appoint people to a local jurisdiction. That doesn't make it local control because you have to live there. It makes it local control that the people that are directly influenced by the decisions that these people make have a direct line of action in order to rectify those problems. So even if all of Kansas City, or let's just even say all of Jackson County voted against the governor, that doesn't necessarily mean that the governor is not going to, the person that they voted against is not going to win. Right. So you can have somebody that's been, just roundly opposed, appoint all of those people to the police board. Well, I don't know that it's all of those people. I think the mayor may have one appointment. I'm not sure. But I just don't think that's right. So
understood.
I just wanted to see if we were on the same page behind that history of how many statutes are on the books and how we could easily downsize state government here and deleting the whole chapter of statutes. So thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to speak on the bill.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So as I said in the conversation with the gentleman, I don't believe that Kansas City, St. Louis, or any of our municipalities are so unique that we have to say that we know the best way as state legislators to take power away from local government. Now, I don't think that's just a personal thing. I've heard the words local control touted quite a bit, even in regards to this bill. Well, I think that it's a simple way to take this all the way back to the people, and that's in withdrawing this bill and completely withdrawing and doing away with Chapter 84 of the revised statutes of the state of Missouri. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on House Committee substitute to House Bill 640. Lady from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To briefly speak on the bill,
Please proceed.
this debate today obviously has reopened a lot of wounds around local versus state control. And I am a Kansas Citian, and I do agree with all of my colleagues that have gone before today to speak about their frustration with Kansas City Police Department not having local control. I do want to say, though, I think this bill is really not about that as much as it's about removing the salary cap and the age requirements. And while I do understand it, I'm just as frustrated about Kansas City not having local control. But I do believe that this bill is moving in the right direction, starting at where we are. Currently, this is where we are as a state. Kansas City does not have that local control. Again, I believe that it's moving in the right direction, and so I would urge the body to support it.
Further discussion on House Committee substitute to House Bill 640. Seeing none, gentleman from Clay, you're recognized to close.
I renew my motion.
The gentleman from Clay has renewed his motion for the adoption of House Committee substitute to House Bill 640. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. You've adopted House Committee substitute to House Bill 640. Gentleman from Clay, you're recognized to renew your motion.
I renew my motion.
The gentleman from Clay has renewed his motion for the perfection and printing of House Committee substitute to House Bill 640. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. You've perfected and printed House Committee substitute to House Bill 640. Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next order of business will be announcements.
Announcements. Gentleman from Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Local Government will meet 10 minutes after dismissal here in Hearing Room 1.
Further announcements. Gentleman from Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to announce that your Committee on Economic Development will meet tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, Hearing Room 1.
Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Announcement.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Financial Institutions will meet in Hearing Room 5 in 5 minutes after adjournment. Thank you.
Gentleman from Audrain.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Healthcare Reform will meet in Hearing Room 1 at 4:30 or upon adjournment.
Lady from Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Higher Ed will meet tomorrow at 2:30. That's a time change to 2:30 in Hearing Room 5. Thank you.
Gentleman from Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Special Committee on Tax Reform will meet in Hearing Room 7 upon adjournment.
Gentleman from Taney.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Super Committee on Tourism will meet House Hearing Room 6 immediately and will immediately stand at ease at 4:30 and regather again at 5 p.m. Thank you.
Lady from Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Elections and Elected Officials will meet in 5 minutes in Hearing Room 6. Thank you.
Gentleman from Webster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Budget Subcommittee on Health, Mental Health, and Social Services will meet in the morning at 8 a.m. in HR 3.
Gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bible Project will not meet in my office tomorrow at 7 a.m. I will be in Kansas City.
Gentleman from St. Louis County.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. The J House Social Club will meet tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock.
Gentleman from Platte.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, your Committee on Consent and House Procedures will meet at 4:30 this afternoon.
Gentleman from Pettis.
Announcement, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed.
Your Committee on K-12 Education will meet tomorrow in House Room 7 at 8 o'clock for a professional development workshop over the foundation formula.
Thank you, gentlemen. Gentleman from Webster, a second time.
Thank you, sir. I apologize, Mr. Speaker. The meeting for Budget Subcommittee in the morning at 8 o'clock is in HR 1.
Thank you, gentlemen. Further announcements. Seeing none, gentleman from Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members should note that the House will meet for regular session tomorrow. However, there will be no roll call votes. So members need to note their attendance with the clerk between 8 and 3. And with no other business before the body, I ask the House stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Wednesday, February 15th, 2023.
The gentleman from Jackson has moved that the House stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Wednesday, February the 15th, 2023. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. And those opposed, no. And the ayes have it. The House is adjourned.